Under the blood moon's crimson gaze, the tundra whispered secrets of forgotten bones, where the wind carved elegies into the eternal ice. Astra Velkin knelt in the snow, her knees sinking into the frost like roots seeking soil that would never yield. The air bit at her skin, sharp as the glares of the wolves encircling her, shadows against the white expanse of Kylrin's frozen heart. At 22 winters, she had learned to endure mockery, the sidelong whispers that branded her an aberration, a hybrid stain on the pure bloodlines of the Pax. Her mother's human frailty had tainted her veins, they said, diluting the sacred shift that bound true Omegas to the moon's call. Loyalty? A joke. Her place among them? Always provisional, a thread frayed by doubt. Tonight, that thread snapped. The rival Pax, clans from the jagged peaks of Vorath and the shadowed vales of Eldmore, had converged like storm clouds, their alphas barking orders under the bloated orb above. The blood moon rose full and merciless, staining the snow in hues of rust and fire, a celestial omen that spoke of purges and reckonings. Torches flickered in their grips, flames dancing like captive spirits, casting elongated shadows that clawed at the ground. Weaves rose in a choral dirge, low and rumbling, vibrating through Astra's chest until her heart stuttered in rhythm. "That creature isn't one of us," hissed Thorn, the Vorath Beta, his voice a venomous curl amid the chants, his eyes, steel gray and unyielding, fixed on her as if she were a blemish to be excised. Beside him, Ilara of Eldmore nodded, her lips twisted in pious disdain. "Impure blood invites the Deusa's wrath. We end it here, before the taint spreads." Astra's breath fogged the air, each exhale a fragile defiance. She had been dragged from her solitary vigil at the Pack's edge, where she gathered herbs under starlight. Her hands calloused from labors no one else would claim. The accusations had built like a blizzard, whispers of her spying for humans, of her scent betraying the wild call of the wolf. Lies, all of them, born from envy of her quiet resilience, her refusal to bow fully to the hierarchies that crush the weak. But truth mattered little in the face of ritual. The Pax demanded purity, and she was the scapegoat offered to the moon. The wind howled through the ravine, whipping snow into veils that stung her cheeks like accusations. She tasted salt on her lips, tears or blood, she couldn't tell. Her body trembled, not from cold alone, but from the hollow ache of rejection, a void where belonging should have bloomed. In her mind's eye, she saw her mother's face, pale and human soft, weaving tales of the Deusa's favor for the outcast. "Strength is not in fangs or fury," her mother had murmured in fevered nights, "but in the quiet fire that endures." Astra had clung to those words, a talisman against the isolation that had shadowed her youth. Now they felt like echoes in an emptying hall. The circle tightened. Warriors stepped forward, their boots crunching the crust of snow, breaths mingling in plumes of white fury. One, a scarred enforcer from Eldmore, raised a blade etched with lunar runes, its edge catching the moon's red light like fresh spilled life. The chants swelled, a rhythmic thunder. "Purity! Purity! Banish the shadow!" Astra's pulse roared in her ears, drowning the voices. Fear coiled in her gut, hot and serpentine, but beneath it stirred something deeper, a flicker, unbidden, like embers stirred by a gale. The moon pressed down, its weight a lover's hand on her soul, urging, pulling. Her skin prickled, veins igniting with a warmth that defied the freeze. She had never shifted, not fully. Her forms were half measures, wolfish glimpses that faded like mist. Unnatural, they called it. Cursed. But tonight, under this bleeding sky, the curse cracked open. The first tremor seized her spine, a jolt like lightning forking through frozen earth. Gasps rippled through the circle as her body arched, bones grinding in symphony with the wind's wail. Fur erupted along her arms, not the common gray or black of pack wolves, but a blinding white, pure as the untouched snowdrifts of the high passes. Her vision sharpened, the world exploding into crystalline detail. The flicker of torchlight on armored hides, the dilated pupils of her accusers, the moon's veins pulsing like rivers of fire. That's not... Thorn's words choked off as Astra's form elongated, muscles rippling beneath the ethereal pelt. She rose on all fours, towering now, her breath a visible storm. The air hummed with power, ancient and unbound, the scent of ozone and wild mint flooding her senses. Whispers from forbidden texts surfaced in her mind, tales of the legendary white wolf, harbinger of the Deuce's judgment, a myth caged in scrolls lest it shatter the world's fragile order. Snow whirled in her wake, a vortex born of her awakening. Warriors stumbled back, knees buckling into the drifts, their weapons forgotten. Alara's torch sputtered, the flame bowing as if in reverence. The chants fractured into stunned silence, broken only by the distant uivo of unseen beasts echoing the revelation. Astra's golden eyes, luminous, unblinking, swept the circle. No longer prey, she was the storm incarnate, the living myth they had sought to slay. Reverence bloomed in their stares, terror twisting into awe, the word creature dissolving like frost under dawn. Yet in her heart, the exile lingered, a scar etched deeper than any blade. Was this salvation or a deeper isolation? The Deuce had chosen her, but at what cost to the fragile humanity she had guarded so fiercely? The blood moon watched, impassive, as the tundra held its breath. The tundra's silence shattered like thin ice under a heavy paw, as the pack's awe curdled into murmurs of prophecy and peril. Astra stood frozen in her new form, the white wolf's sinews humming with untamed power, her flanks rising and falling in the rhythm of a storm held at bay. The blood moon hung low, its light threading through her fur like veins of molten silver, illuminating the circle of knelt warriors whose faces twisted between devotion and dread. Thorn's blade trembled in his grip, forgotten, while Ilara's eyes widened, tracing the ethereal glow that marked Astra not as impurity, but as the Deuce's own blade forged in frost. Yet reverence was a fragile truce. From the shadowed rim of the ravine, a low growl rumbled, not from the encircling packs, but from the darkness beyond, where the wind carried the metallic tang of fresh blood and the acrid bite of betrayal. Figures stirred in the gloom, scouts from the high clans, their silhouettes jagged against the crimson sky, bearing the sigil of the Iron Fang throne, a crown of thorns etched in ice. Among them, a lone alpha staggered into the torchlight, his massive frame buckling under wounds that wept crimson into the snow. He was no ordinary exile. His pelt, even in half-shift, bore the faded scars of royal battles, and his eyes, deep amber flecked with storm gray, held the weight of a kingdom's ghosts. King Eirik of the Iron Fang, they whispered later, though in that moment Astra knew him only as the intruder who disrupted her fragile ascension. He collapsed to one knee mere paces from the circle, his breath a ragged plume, one foreleg twisted at an unnatural angle, gashes raking his chest where silver-laced arrows had bitten deep. Cursed, some said, by a traitor's right that bound his shifts to endless pain, a penance for the purges he'd ordered in youth to safeguard his realm. Guilt clung to him like the frost on his fur, a melancholy shroud woven from the lives he'd claimed in the name of duty. Ethical to his core, he had wandered these wastes in self-imposed exile, seeking the Deuce's judgment rather than his pack's hollow throne. Astra's wolf senses flared, the instinctive pull yanking at her core like a tether snapped taut. His scent flooded her, pine and iron, mingled with the sharp ozone of a soul fractured by remorse. It stirred something primal, a curiosity laced with fear, as if the moon itself had drawn him here to mirror her own unraveling. She should have lunged, driven the pack's awe into fury against this wounded king who reeked of old wars. Instead, her golden eyes locked on his, and the world narrowed to the shared pulse of their labored breaths, the wind weaving between them like an unspoken vow. Eirik lifted his head, amber gaze piercing the veil of snow. Recognition flickered there, not of her face, but of the legend she embodied, the white wolf, harbinger of redemption or ruin. "Deuce's grace," he rasped, voice gravel rough from disuse, shifting partially to man form, his broad shoulders heaving under a tattered cloak embroidered with faded lunar threads. Blood trickled from his lip, staining the snow a deeper red, and he extended a clawed hand, not in threat, but in wary plea. "Not one of them. You." The pax erupted. Thorns surged forward, blade raised, his hiss cutting the air. The king flees like a cur, and now seeks sanctuary from a myth. "We'll have his head for the old betrayals." Ilara's warriors flanked him, torches blazing higher, their uivos a cacophony that clashed with the distant howls echoing from the peaks. Omens of greater storms brewing in the clan's fractured alliances. Games of power twisted in the night. Vorath and Eldmore had long plotted against Ironfang's throne, using Astra's impurity as pretext to unite against a common phantom. But Eric's arrival shattered their ritual, his presence a spark to dry tinder. Fear coiled in Astra's chest, hot against the wolf's instinctive surge to protect this broken sovereign whose guilt echoed her own isolation. Why him? The connection defied reason, born not of desire, but of the raw curiosity that bridged two exiles under the bleeding moon. She could deny it, revert to her human frailty and let the pax tear him apart, proving her loyalty at last. Or yield to the pull, the Deuce's whisper urging mercy over the hierarchies that had scarred them both. With a low whine that vibrated through the frost, Astra stepped forward, her white form a barrier between the king and the advancing blades. Snow swirled in her wake, veiling them in a curtain of white, the wind's chill biting deeper as if the tundra itself mourned the choice. Eric's eyes softened, a flicker of melancholy gratitude amid the pain, but he shook his head faintly. "No debt to a fallen king," he murmured, voice laced with the philosophy of one who had weighed thrones against souls. "What is strength, if not the freedom to walk alone?" Yet as the first arrow whistled past, grazing her flank with a sting of fire, Astra's resolve hardened. The packs closed in, their chants twisting to cries of war, traitor and myth united against purity's blade. Blood scented the air, mingling with the king's wounds. And under the moon's unyielding watch, the instinctive bond took root, denied yet undeniable, curiosity blooming into the first fragile thread of something deeper. Not love, but the shared ache of the forsaken. The night deepened, flames licking the edges of the fray as Astra's heart thundered with the dilemma, save the guilty king and embrace her myth, or shatter it all in the name of a belonging forever lost. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The blizzard's fury descended like the Deuce's veiled wrath, swallowing the ravine's edges in a shroud of white that blurred the line between salvation and oblivion. Astra's white form lunged through the fray, her paws churning snow into a blinding mist, the sting of the grazed arrow a distant throb beneath the surge of primal instinct. Blood, hot and coppery, flecked her muzzle from a glancing bite she dealt Thorn's advancing flank. But it was Eric's ragged breaths that anchored her, pulling her back to shield the fallen king as arrows whistled like vengeful spirits through the gale. He had risen to a crouch beside her, his half-shifted body a fortress of scarred muscle and iron will, one arm slung low to favor the twisted limb. The scent of his wounds mingled with the sharp pine of his essence, weaving through the chaos like an invisible thread binding them against the onslaught. Vorath and Eldmore warriors pressed in, their torches sputtering against the wind's assault, flames twisting into grotesque faces that illuminated snarling maws and eyes wild with betrayal's fire. "The White Wolf consorts with the cursed throne!" Alara bellowed, her voice cracking like ice under pressure, as she hurled a spear that embedded in the snow mere inches from Astra's haunch. The pack's unity fractured further, old rivalries igniting. Ironfang's ghost had poisoned their ritual purge, turning Astra's myth into a banner for the very impurity they feared. Astra's heart pounded a war drum in her chest, each beat echoing the king's labored exhales, their rhythms sinking in the storm's howl. She didn't know him, not his name beyond the whispers of a fallen realm, nor the ghosts that haunted his amber gaze. But the pull was visceral, a curiosity sharpened into fierce protectiveness. He had called her Grace, not monster, in that moment of raw vulnerability, and now, as a beta from Vorath lunged with claws extended, Eric met him midair, his good arm slamming the attacker into the drift with a crunch of bone and silenced snarl. Blood sprayed, warm against the freeze, staining the snow in patterns that evoked ancient lunar runes, symbols of bonds forged in trial, not choice. They moved as one, an unspoken alliance born of necessity's forge. Astra's white pelt gleamed under the blood moon's fading crimson, a beacon that drew the pack's fury like moths to flame. She barreled through a cluster of Eldmore scouts, her jaws snapping with restrained power, scattering them into the drifts where the wind buried their cries. Eirik followed, his movements deliberate despite the pain etching lines into his face, each strike a measured ethic rather than blind rage. He spared a killing blow when he could have taken a throat, murmuring under his breath as he pinned another foe. Not for vengeance, but survival. His voice, gravel-worn and laced with melancholy, cut through the din, stirring something in Astra's core, a flicker of empathy for the king who carried guilt like a crown of thorns. The wind screamed louder, carrying uivos from the distant peaks, harbingers of reinforcements that would seal their doom. Astra's senses sharpened to the overload, the metallic tang of spilled blood, the acrid smoke of dying torches, the king's warmth radiating against her side as they backed toward a jagged crevice in the ravine's wall, a narrow fissure promising temporary sanctuary, its mouth veiled by icicles like the Deusa's frozen tears. She nudged him urgently, her golden eyes meeting his in a glance heavy with unspoken questions. Why fight for me, a myth unchained? His response was a faint nod, the corner of his mouth lifting in wry acknowledgement, as if he too questioned the tether drawing them deeper into this shared peril. They plunged into the crevice as one, the stone walls closing around them like the jaws of some ancient beast, muffling the pack's pursuing roars. The air grew thicker, laced with the mineral bite of deep earth and the faint, sacred hum of hidden aquifers. Astra shifted back to her human form mid-stride, the transformation a ripple of agony and release, her skin prickling as fur receded and the wolf's power coiled inward. She caught Eric's arm to steady him, his weight heavy but unyielding, and they stumbled into a cavernous hollow where moonlight filtered through a high crack, painting the walls in silver veins that pulsed like living breath. He slumped against the rough stone, breath hissing through clenched teeth as he fully reverted, his royal cloak torn and bloodied, revealing the intricate scars mapping his torso, marks of battles won and thrones forsaken. Astra knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she tore strips from her own ragged tunic to bind the deepest gash on his chest. The touch was electric, not of passion, but of raw connection, her fingers brushing skin fever-hot against the cavern's chill. Up close, his face was a map of quiet torment, high cheekbones shadowed by stubble, eyes holding the depth of northern seas, stormy with the weight of decisions that had cost him everything. "You owe me nothing," he said softly, his voice a low rumble that echoed the distant wind. "A king without a pack. What refuge can I offer a legend?" She met his gaze, the empathy blooming unbidden, transforming the instinctive pull into something tangible, a bond woven from mirrored fractures. Her own scars, invisible but no less deep, surfaced in the silence. The years of sidelong glances, the ache of half-belonging, now mirrored in his exile. "Refuge isn't owed," she replied, her words steady despite the tremor in her chest, the scent of his blood stirring a protective fire within. "It's chosen, like mercy over the blade." The philosophy hung between them, simple yet profound, as she pressed the makeshift bandage firm, their breaths mingling in the confined space, warm against the encroaching cold. Outside, the storm raged on, the pack's howls fading into frustrated echoes, bought time by the blizzard's veil. But within, the air thickened with possibility, the white wolf's essence lingering in Astra's veins like a dormant flame. Irik's hand covered hers briefly, a gesture of gratitude laced with restraint, his touch igniting sparks of curiosity that delved deeper, questioning not just survival, but the souls that had led them here. The moon's light danced on the walls, casting their shadows as entwined silhouettes, and in that fragile respite, the bond took root, empathy's quiet bloom amid the blood and frost. Yet as the wind's lull hinted at pursuing footsteps crunching nearer, Astra's heart clenched with the weight of what lay beyond. Enemies united by fear, a destiny that demanded more than mere hiding. Could this shared shelter forge something enduring, or would it crumble under the tundra's unforgiving truth? The cavern's silver-veined walls seemed to breathe in rhythm with Astra's pulse, the moonlight filtering through the overhead fissure like a hesitant lover's touch, casting elongated shadows that danced across Eric's bloodied form. She withdrew her hand from his bandaged chest, the warmth of his skin lingering on her fingertips like an unspoken promise, while the distant rumble of the storm outside pressed against the stone like the pack's unrelenting grudge. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and iron-tanged wounds, a metallic undercurrent that twisted her gut, reminding her of the fragility threading through their refuge. Empathy had rooted here, fragile as new frost, transforming the king's guarded melancholy into a shared silence that spoke louder than words. Irik shifted against the wall, his amber eyes tracing her face with a quiet intensity that stirred the wolf within her. A restless coil of power not fully sated by the shift. Pain etched deeper lines into his features, but beneath it lay a king's restraint, ethical and unyielding, as if he bore the weight of Ironfang's fallen banners not as burden, but as penance. "The white wolf," he murmured, voice a low timbre echoing the cavern's hum. "Not a myth to slay, but one to witness." His gaze held no reverence born of fear, only the melancholy curiosity of a soul adrift, seeking meaning in the Deusa's capricious weave. Astra felt exposed under that stare, her human skin prickling as if the moon's light peeled back her layers, revealing the hybrid fractures she'd long hidden, the human softness that blurred her shifts, the quiet endurance that masked a deeper, uncharted fire. She turned away, kneeling to gather shards of luminescent quartz from the cavern floor, crystals that caught the moonlight in prismatic gleams, whispering of ancient lunar rites. Her fingers brushed one, and a jolt surged through her, unbidden and fierce, like the blood moon's pulse reigniting in her veins. The wolf stirred again, not in fury, but in revelation, her vision blurring as the cavern dissolved into veils of silver mist. Images flooded her mind, fragmented visions of Ironfang's throne room, shrouded in shadow, where Irik's younger self stood amid a circle of chained omegas, his orders carving guilt into his soul like silver blades. Purges for purity, he had decreed, to fortify the realm against human incursions. Yet each execution had hollowed him, binding a curse that twisted his shifts into agony, a spiritual tether to the lives he'd severed. Astra gasped, the quartz crumbling in her grip, its dust shimmering like fallen stars. Her body arched, the white wolf's essence erupting not in full form, but as an ethereal glow that enveloped her, fur-like tendrils of light weaving through the air. The hidden gift, the Pathfinder's sight, whispered in her mother's forbidden tales, manifested at last, a dawn of the Deusa granted to the outcast, allowing her to trace the threads of destiny like paths in untrodden snow. It was no mere shift, it was vision, raw and visceral, pulling truths from the ether. She saw Eric's curse clearly now, a ritual scar on his heart, etched by a traitor's hand during the purges, one that demanded redemption through the white wolf's gaze. A living myth to guide the fallen back to grace, or condemn them to eternal exile. The glow pulsed, illuminating the cavern in a soft, otherworldly radiance, the moonlight amplifying it into beams that traced Eric's scars like accusatory fingers. He recoiled at first, breath catching, but then leaned forward, amber eyes widening as the visions bled into his awareness through their nascent bond, the empathy now a conduit, sharing her sight. Flashes assaulted him, his packs fracturing under rival alpha's schemes, Vorath and Eldmore weaving alliances with silver-tipped arrows poisoned by old grudges, a greater threat looming from the southern human enclaves, their iron forges belching smoke that choked the moon's domain. And at the center, Astra, not impurity, but the key, her hybrid blood the bridge between wolf and world, her Pathfinder gift the map to heal the curse, to rally the clans under a redeemed throne. "You see it," he whispered, voice fracturing with awe and dread, his hand reaching out to steady her as the glow faded, leaving her trembling in its wake. Tears stung Astra's eyes, the revelation a double-edged blade, empowering yet isolating, confirming her otherness as divine design rather than flaw. The wolf's power hummed in her blood, warm against the cavern's chill, but it carried the weight of choice, to guide this king, marked by the guilt she now intimately knew, or retreat into the myth's solitude. Eric's face softened, the melancholy deepening into profound realization, his clawed fingers brushing her cheek in a gesture of raw vulnerability. "The Deusa didn't curse me alone," he said, words laced with philosophical gravity, "but wove our exiles into one path. What is destiny, if not the mercy to claim it?" His touch ignited a spark, not of romance's fire, but of spiritual kinship, the bond evolving from refuge's necessity to revelation's truth. Yet as the glow's echoes faded, the cavern trembled, a low rumble from without, the pack's howls piercing the stone like vengeful echoes, drawn by the unnatural light that had betrayed their hiding. Astra's heart clenched, the Pathfinder's sight flickering with foreboding. Confrontation loomed, not just blades, but the moral forge of past sins. Eirik rose unsteadily, his resolve steeling despite the pain, eyes locking on hers with newfound purpose. She was the key, he knew now, to his redemption's door, but unlocking it demanded they face the tundra's judgment together, blood and moon as witnesses. The wind outside howled a warning, carrying the scent of approaching torches as the revelation settled like fresh snow. Astra's gift had bound them, but the path ahead demanded sacrifice, her light the beacon that could crown or consume. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw the cavern's fragile sanctuary cracked like thawing ice under the onslaught of howls that clawed through the stone, the pack's fury a tidal wave crashing against the walls. Astra's breath hitched, the Pathfinder's glow still fading from her skin like dying embers, leaving her human form chilled and exposed in the moon's silver wash. Eirik stood beside her, his bandaged chest rising with labored resolve, amber eyes hardening into the steel of a king roused from exile's stupor. The revelation had bound them, not in chains of affection, but in the inexorable weave of destiny, her gift illuminating his curse as a mirror to her own fractured blood. Yet as the rumble grew, vibrations shaking loose crystalline dust from the ceiling, Astra felt the weight of it settle. The past was no longer a shadow, but a blade descending, demanding judgment on the tundra's bloodied stage. She moved first, instinct guiding her to the crevice's mouth, where the blizzard's remnants swirled in eddies of white fury. Peering out, her golden-flecked eyes pierced the veil. Torchlight bobbed like predatory eyes, closing in from the ravine's flanks. Vorath and Eldmore had merged their forces, a serpentine line of warriors slinking through the drifts, their breaths plumes of vengeful mist. At their vanguard strode Thorn, his steel-gray pelt half-shifted, blade gleaming with fresh runes etched in haste. But it was the figure flanking him that twisted Astra's gut. Riven, the Iron-Fang traitor. Once Eric's sworn beta, his muzzle scarred from the purges he had twisted into personal gain. Riven's eyes burned with opportunistic fire, the sigil of a self-proclaimed rival alpha, a jagged crown of thorns, emblazoned on his cloak, stolen from the throne's ruins. He had poisoned the arrows that felled Eric, whispering lies to fracture the clans, all to claim the Iron-Fang legacy for his own ruthless ambition. The White Wolf harbors the cursed king. Riven's voice boomed, amplified by the wind's howl, carrying the acrid scent of silver-laced barbs. She is no myth, but a deceiver, her hybrid taint allying with our fallen tyrant's blood. The packs roared in accord, weavos rising in a choral storm that drowned the distant thunder of approaching reinforcements. Thorn's sneer twisted into zealous fervor, Alara's spear arm tensing beside him, their alliance a fragile web spun from shared hatred. Astra's impurity and Irik's guilt, woven into a pretext for war's harvest. Games of power unfurled like banners in the gale. Riven's betrayal had ignited this convergence, promising the rival pack spoils of Iron-Fang's frozen halls if they crushed the exiles here under the moon's judgmental gaze. Eric's hand clamped on Astra's shoulder, a grounding heat against the encroaching cold. His touch rationalized as alliance's necessity, though it stirred the resisted pull deeper within her. "They come for thrones built on old sins," he murmured, voice laced with melancholy gravity, the ethical core of him refusing to yield to blind rage. Riven, he was my shadow, the blade I wielded too freely in the purges. This confrontation is mine to face. But Astra shook him off, her heart a forge of conflicting fires. The wolf's protective surge clashing with the human ache of freedom's call. To stand with him meant embracing the myth's burden, guiding his redemption at the cost of her solitude. To flee alone would shatter the bond's fragile thread, condemning him to the pack's mercy, a war she knew would claim innocence in its wake. The first wave breached the crevice, warriors spilling into the narrow throat like a flood of fangs and steel. Astra shifted mid-leap, her form exploding into the White Wolf's ethereal grace, fur a whirlwind of pristine fury that scattered the vanguard. Snow erupted in her wake, veiling the fray as she barreled into Thorn, her jaws clamping his arm with restrained power, enough to disarm, not destroy. Blood welled, hot and vivid against the frost, staining her muzzle in crimson arcs that evoked the moon's own veins. Eric followed, his twisted limb no hindrance to the king's precision. He grappled Riven in the chaos, their bodies colliding with the force of unresolved history, claws raking fur as old accusations spilled forth. "You purged the weak to hoard power, Eric," Riven snarled, his form bulging into full alpha shift, eyes wild with the traitor's unquenched ambition. "And now you hide behind a half-breed legend? The Dusa demands blood for your throne's lies." Eric parried a savage lunge, his breath ragged but unbreaking, the pain of his curse twisting his features into a mask of quiet torment. "Purging was duty's poison," he countered, voice steady amid the clash, philosophical restraint guiding his strikes. "Not glory. You twisted it for your crown, Riven, betrayed the packs for shadows of rule." Their battle spilled into the open tundra, the wind whipping snow into blinding sheets, torches guttering as the white wolf's presence sowed doubt among the ranks. Warriors hesitated, knees buckling anew at the sight of Astra's form. The legendary white wolf weaving through the melee like a spectral judge, her golden eyes piercing illusions of purity. Astra's mind raced, the Pathfinder's gift flickering in bursts, visions of forked paths, war's red tide swallowing the clans in endless vendetta, or forgiveness's narrow trail, her light mending Irik's scar through shared mercy. Riven's claws grazed Eric's side, reopening wounds, blood spraying in a warm arc that splattered her pelt. The king staggered, but held, his gaze finding hers across the storm. A silent plea, not for salvation, but for the choice that defined strength. Love's seed, resisted as folly, rationalized as destiny's trick, pressed against her resolve. To forgive his past meant chaining her freedom to his redemption, or to unleash war's fury for the liberty of isolation. The packs encircled tighter, Ilara's spear whistling past Astra's ear, Thorn's blade seeking her flank, their chants a dirge of impure, traitor. In the fray's heart, as Riven pinned Eric against a jagged outcrop, the moon crested higher, its light bathing the bloodied snow in silver absolution. Astra lunged, her white form a barrier of light and fang, bowling Riven aside with the Deuce's force. The traitor skidded into the drifts, winded, his eyes widening in dawning fear. Not of defeat, but of the moral precipice. Irik rose, bloodied but unbroken, extending a hand to his old betrayer, the gesture a philosophical olive amid the carnage. End this cycle, Riven, not with thrones, but truth. Astra's heart tore. Freedom whispered retreat, the wolf's wild call urging her to vanish into the peaks alone. Yet the bond, evolved through Revelation's fire, demanded more. Compassion over conquest, her gift the key to unlock not just his curse, but the pack's fractured soul. The choice crystallized as the packs paused, breaths heaving in the wind's lull, awaiting the white wolf's judgment. War or forgiveness? Her golden eyes swept the circle, the tundra holding its breath, blood and snow, as silent witnesses to the ethical forge. In that suspended moment, Astra stepped forward, the weight of Renascimento hovering like the moon's promise. Sacrifice for unity or liberty's lonely howl? Word count, 872. The tundra's breath held captive in that suspended hush, the bloodied snow a canvas for the moon's silver judgment as Astra's white form stood sentinel amid the fray's dying echoes. Her flanks heaved, the wolf's power thrumming like a sacred drum in her veins, golden eyes sweeping the encircling packs, faces etched with the raw etchings of doubt and fervor, torches flickering like hesitant stars against the encroaching night. Riven lay sprawled in the drifts, his traitor's chest rising in ragged defiance, while Eric's extended hand remained outstretched, a bridge of scarred flesh and unyielding ethic, trembling not from weakness but from the gravity of mercy's demand. The wind whispered through the ravine, carrying the faint metallic tang of spilled blood and the distant weevo of unseen watchers, as if the Deusa herself leaned close, her lunar gaze pressing Astra toward the precipice of choice. Freedom clawed at her core, a wild impulse to dissolve into the storm's embrace, to let the white wolf's legend fade into solitary howls among the peaks. She had endured rejection's bite for too long, the pack's whispers carving deeper than any claw, her hybrid blood a chain she had forged into quiet strength. To bind herself to this king, with his throne of ghosts and purge's shadows, meant sacrificing that hard-won isolation for a destiny's yoke, her Pathfinder gift the key that could heal his curse but fracture her own fragile sovereignty. Yet the bond, woven through Refuge's fire and Revelation's light, pulsed insistent, a spiritual tether that rationalized resistance into reluctant truth. Love was no gentle bloom, but redemption's forge, demanding she choose not for reward, but for the souls entwined in the moon's weave. Eric's amber eyes met hers across the snow-churned arena, stormy depths reflecting the melancholy of a ruler who had bartered innocence for duty's crown. Blood trickled from his reopened wounds, staining the frost in crimson rivulets that snaked toward her paws, symbolic rivers of shared fracture. "The path diverges here," he said, voice a low rumble cutting the silence, laced with the philosophical weight of one who knew throne's illusions. "Forgive the past, Astra, and we rise together, or let it claim me, and claim your liberty unscarred." His words hung like frost crystals, stirring the wolf within her to a fevered whine, the air thick with the scent of pine from his essence, mingling with the cavern's lingering mineral bite that clung to her pelt. The pack stirred, murmurs rippling like wind through dry grass, Thorn's blade hand twitching, Alara's spear lowering fractionally, Riven pushing to his knees with a snarl that twisted into wary calculation. The traitor's eyes darted between them, ambition's fire dimming under the white wolf's luminous stare, the revelation of her gift having pierced his schemes like moonlight through fog. Visions flickered at Astra's edges, the Pathfinder's dawn unbidden, futures branching like tundra veins. One of endless war, clans splintering into blood-soaked feuds under rival Alpha's iron grips. Another of Union's quiet dawn, her light mending Eric's ritual scar, rallying the fractured packs under Compassion's banner. But the cost gleamed stark. Sacrifice her human solitude, the freedom to wander unbound, for the cure that would crown him anew, their bond evolving into something accepted, not as passion's rush, but as spiritual rebirth. A low growl built in her throat, vibrating through the snow as she stepped forward, her form shimmering in the moon's caress. The white fur caught the light, ethereal and unyielding, a living symbol of the Deuce's favor for the Forsaken. She circled Riven slowly, paws silent on the crust, the pack's breaths sinking to her rhythm, the wind falling to a reverent hush. Up close, the traitor's scars mirrored Eric's, marks of the purges he had perverted, his betrayal born not from malice alone, but from the despair of a beta overshadowed by a king's unassailable ethic. "Rise," Astra commanded, her voice emerging dual-toned, wolf and woman entwined, carrying the lunar authority that buckled knees anew. Riven hesitated, claws flexing in the snow, but her golden gaze held him, the Pathfinder's light pulsing faintly, revealing the thread of redemption even in his shadowed soul. He extended a trembling hand, clasping Eric's at last, the union a spark that ignited murmurs of awe among the warriors. Thorn lowered his blade, Alara's spear dipping as the circle widened, the pack's unity fracturing not into chaos, but into tentative accord, the white wolf's presence a moral compass, turning vengeance's blade inward. Astra shifted then, the transformation a cascade of light and shadow, reverting to her human form with a gasp that echoed the wind's sigh. Naked save for the frost-kissed air, she stood between them, her skin prickling under the moon's gaze, vulnerability a deliberate offering. Eirik shed his tattered cloak, draping it over her shoulders with a touch restrained and reverent, the fabric warm from his body, scented with iron and resolve. The cure began in that moment, her hand pressing to his chest where the ritual scar throbbed, a hidden brand of silver thorns etched by Riven's treachery during the purge's height. The Pathfinder's gift surged, warm light blooming from her palm, threading through his veins like moonlight piercing storm clouds. Eric arched, a low groan escaping as the curse unraveled, pain twisting into release, his amber eyes locking on hers in profound gratitude. Visions shared, the pack's healing, borders redrawn not by blood, but by pacts forged in the Deuce's name, her hybrid blood the bridge to human kin, ending cycles of war. But the sacrifice etched deep. Astra felt her freedom ebb, the wolf's wild call softening into harmony with his steady heartbeat, love accepted at last as the quiet fire of rebirth, not conquest's prize. Riven bowed his head, the traitor yielding to the king's reclaimed shadow, while the packs knelt in waves, Weavos rising not in dirge, but in choral rebirth, the blood moon paling to silver absolution. Yet as the light faded, Astra's heart clenched with the final whisper of loss, solitude's echo, a scar she would carry into this union. Eirik drew her close, his arm a pillar against the wind's resurgence, their breaths mingling in the night's deepening chill. "What is strength?" he murmured, echoing the philosophy that had bound them. "If not choosing the path that mends the broken world?" The tundra exhaled, snow settling like a benediction, as the Renascimento took hold. Sacrifice and cure entwined, their union aflame kindled under the moon's watchful eye. But in the distance, shadows stirred on the peaks, harbingers of trials yet to come, the Deus's weave far from complete. Astra leaned into him, the bond's warmth a defiant light against the cold, ready to face whatever dawn the north would forge. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive. The dawn crept over Caelryn's jagged peaks like a hesitant confession, its pale light bleeding into the tundra's silvered hush, washing the bloodied snow in hues of fragile pink. Astra stood at the ravine's edge, Eirik's cloak draped over her shoulders like a mantle of reclaimed shadows, its weight a tangible echo of the union forged in the night's crucible. The packs had dispersed at first light, their weavos softening from war cries to murmurs of uneasy fealty. Riven's bowed head the linchpin that held the fragile peace. Yet as the wind stirred the settling drifts, carrying the faint, earthy scent of thawing earth beneath the frost, Astra felt the Renascimento's true cost settle in her bones, a quiet erosion of the wild solitude she had once cradled like a secret flame. Eirik moved beside her, his step steady now, the curses unraveling, leaving his form unburdened, scars fading to silvery threads that caught the emerging sun like lunar echoes. The ritual brand on his chest, once a throbbing thorn of silver and betrayal, had dissolved under her Pathfinder's touch, its dissolution a visceral pull that had drawn from her own essence. Threads of her hybrid blood, the human fragility that had marked her as outcast, woven into his healing like roots merging in frozen soil. She had chosen union over liberty, sacrifice over the lone wolf's howl, rationalizing the resisted bond as destiny's inexorable call. But in the quiet aftermath, as his hand brushed hers, warm, restrained, a king's ethic in every gesture, the acceptance tasted bittersweet, love's proof not in ecstasy's rush, but in the steady ache of shared rebirth. The tundra stretched before them, vast and unforgiving, its white expanse scarred by the night's violence. Crimson-flecked hollows where blades had met flesh, trampled paths veering toward the distant Ironfang halls, now poised for redemption's siege. Riven trailed at a respectful distance, his traitor's gait humbled, eyes downcast as he relayed whispers from the dispersing clans. Vorath and Eldmore pledging tentative oaths, their alphas swayed by the White Wolf's judgment, the Deuce's favor manifest in Astra's light. Yet doubt lingered in the air, sharp as the morning's chill bite on her skin. The pack's reverence, a thin veil over old grudges. Her gift had mended the king, but the greater fractures, the purge's ghosts, the human enclaves encroaching iron, demanded more than one night's mercy. Compassion had crowned the fallen, but power's shadow loomed, testing if their union could forge lasting peace or crumble under war's renewed gale. Astra's fingers tightened on the cloak's edge, the fabric's faint pine scent grounding her as memories surfaced unbidden. Her mother's tales of the Pathfinder, not as savior, but as wanderer, bearing the weight of visions that bound the Forsaken to greater wholes. She had always envisioned freedom as the untamed peaks, solitary vigils under starlit skies where rejection's sting faded into self-forged strength. Now, entwined with Eric's path, that vision blurred, her wolf essence harmonizing with his steady rhythm. The instinctive pull evolved into accepted kinship, a romantic tragedy resolved in quiet resolve, tenderness blooming from the soil of mutual scars. "The Deusa doesn't grant ease," she murmured, her voice a soft cadence against the wind's low moan. Golden-flecked eyes tracing the horizon where the blood moon's ghost lingered as a faint crimson haze. "She demands we carry the light, even when it burns." Eirik nodded, his amber gaze softening with the melancholy depth of one who had tasted throne's illusions and found them hollow. He placed a hand on her shoulder, the touch igniting no fevered spark, but a profound warmth that echoed the cavern's refuge, the revelation's shared truths. "Redemption is no crown without its thorns," he replied, words laced with philosophical gravity, his ethical core shining through the dawn's light like polished steel. "You've given me more than healing, Astra, the choice to build not on blood, but on the mercy we both learned in exile." His presence was a pillar, unyielding yet compassionate, the guilt that had shadowed him now transmuted into purpose, their bond the bridge between Omega's quiet fire and Alpha's burdened rain. They descended the ravine together, paws and boots crunching the fresh crust, the packs falling in behind like a procession to some ancient temple. Riven led scouts toward the southern borders, where human forges belched smoke against the moon's domain, his redemption a tentative thread in the weave. Astra's light had pierced his ambition, revealing paths of alliance over conquest. Visions flickered at her edges, the Pathfinder's gift a gentle hum now, not the explosive surge of revelation. Futures of pacts sealed in lunar rites, hybrid bloodlines embraced as strength, the tundra's wars yielding to a realm where faith triumphed over despair. Yet each glimpse carried the scar of sacrifice, her freedom's echo, a distant howl that whispered of what might have been, the white wolf's legend forever tethered to this king's side. As they crested a rise overlooking the Iron Fang spires, towers of ice-veined stone piercing the sky like frozen prayers, Astra paused, the wind whipping her hair in veils of dark silk. The sun climbed higher, gilding the snow in golden antiquity, while far below, warriors gathered at the gates, their forms small against the epic scale. Eric's hand found hers, intertwining fingers in silent vow, the union a renascimento complete. Not flawless harmony, but the raw beauty of souls mended through choice. Love had proven itself in the forge of trial, redemption's flame kindled not as reward, but as the enduring light that banished isolation's night. The Deusa's moon watched from the fading stars, impassive witness to their path, as the tundra exhaled a breath of possibility. Astra leaned into him, heart steady in the dawn's embrace, the white wolf's essence a quiet guardian within, ready for the trials ahead, where power bowed to compassion and rejection bloomed into eternal reign. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.